Session.
Go ahead, Mr. Alessi, whenever you're ready.
Just take a moment, Your Honor, to reorient. I'll be right. Good afternoon, Dr. Welcher.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you again.
Same. We had left off talking about some examples of Newton's second law and the application of it in the parlance of force equals mass times acceleration. And I now want to continue on with that discussion. It is correct that you can conduct a force analysis on any part of the body, correct?
I mean, it's more difficult on internal with live people. Like if you wanted like my appendix, I really necessarily couldn't.
Let's talk about the musculoskeletal system, the outside bones. You can conduct a force analysis
So your
on
bones
any
are on
bone.
the inside.
Sir, if I could finish my question, please.
Okay.
You can conduct a force analysis on any bone in the body, correct?
More or less, yes.
So the force analysis I use as a synonym with Newton's second law is not exclusive to the head, correct? You can do it on other bones in the body, correct?
Correct.
On direct examination, your direct examination here, you did not present a force calculation representing what you allege to be contact between the vehicle and Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, did you?
Correct.
And nowhere in your report do you present a force calculation for Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, do you?
Correct. We didn't have enough information to do it.
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Now, given that you stated that, quote, determining the effects of physical forces on the human anatomy, end quote, is the job of a biomechanical engineer, you must have conducted several force calculations related to accidents involving humans in your career, correct?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Now, you didn't present a force calculation in your materials, as you've stated, on direct with regard to the arm, and I'll include in the right arm going from the shoulder all the way to the tip of the hand, okay? So that's my definition of a right arm. You didn't present any force calculation on that part of the body of Mr. O'Keefe, did you?
Correct.
Assume, and we're going to apply Newton's second law. Assume Mr. O'Keefe's hand weighed 7 pounds. So that's the M in the F equals MA.
That's not a good assumption.
Well, what number would you like to apply for an M for the hand of Mr. O'Keefe? I'll take any number you got.
Just the hand?
Just the hand.
Oh, the whole arm of Mr. O'Keefe weighs approximately 12 pounds.
Okay, fair enough. So the whole arm, from the shoulder down to the tip of the fingers, is about 12 pounds, right?
Correct.
Okay. So assume that the Lexus SUV was traveling at 20 miles an hour. All right? Under your theory going backwards, 20 miles an hour. And the third variable I'd like to give you is to assume an impact window of 10 milliseconds.
Okay.
Can you calculate the G's of force from that data?
You need more information.
Well, let me ask you this. What more information would you need?
So we talked about the glancing impact.
I'm talking about a force calculation of an impact, not as to whether it's glancing or not.
So you want a direct head-on impact in the arm, not a glancing hit to where the Lexus comes in, hits the arm, and they continue off together?
I'd like to start with that, but just so we can hopefully expedite it for the jury.
Okay.
I'm going to want to get to what you have depicted in your diagram of holding the arm out. And that's not a glancing impact. Is that, sir, with the right arm in parallel with the back of the Lexus?
Yes, it is. So really I'm sorry, let me finish, please. What you're concerned about is where the center of mass is. With the center of mass out towards the corner of the car, that becomes a glancing contact. So you don't have a center of mass contact, you have a glancing contact.
Okay, fair enough. Well, so let's start the first force calculation.
I need my calculator.
I'm going to let him use his calculator.
Sure.
Okay,
Tell me when you're ready, sir.
go ahead.
So let's take a scenario where it's a center of impact,
Center of mass.
center of mass impact, right?
Okay,
Impact to the right arm.
okay,
Let's start with that one.
okay. And you want me
So-
to use like a 10 millisecond?
Yeah, be conservative. Yeah, let's use a 10 millisecond for
Okay.
the impact window.
Okay, question?
What do you get for F of force in the F equals M times A calculation?
About 2,188 pounds. I made a triangular crash pulse assumption.
Right, and if you took the milliseconds in half, become less conservative, would you end up doubling the 2188 number?
If you cut it in half, you would double, yes.
Exactly, through a simple mathematical semi-algebraic application of the numbers, correct? You
Correct.
divide,
We're doing a little simplification in terms of the crash
Yes.
pulse shape, but generally, yes.
right. So, but let's take the conservative number, the lower number, 2188 that you came up with. Do you know from the literature, as you did with the head, you went to the literature and said this is how much pounds of force the you would get to have to cause a break at the occipital bone? Do you know from the literature how much force it would take to break an arm bone?
I have an idea, yes.
What is your idea?
So for a distributed load, such as this, not a concentrated load, you're going to need somewhere between, I've seen, and this is for cadaver tests, a low of like 2,500, maybe a little lower, to a high of 7,000.
Sir, you have switched, haven't you? We're talking about center mass impact. Did you in your calculation just switch to a side swipe impact to
No.
do your calculation?
No.
I'm asking about a center of mass impact. How much force would you need? Let's start with the hand. Maybe it's a simpler one. Do you know how much force it takes to break, any of the hand bones, you know what I'm referring to, the phalangeals?
Yes.
The metacarpals, and the carpals?
Correct.
How much pounds of force do you need to break any one of those bones?
Actually, I didn't find any distributed loading on the amount of force. I don't know.
Well, no, I understand, but I'm asking, do you know from the literature, not a calculation? Doesn't the literature tell you? Can't you go to the literature like you did with the head, and you say, okay, to break the occipital bone, the literature says you need a minimum amount of force of this. I'm asking you the same question for the hand. If you don't know, it's okay, but do you know what the literature says for how much force is needed to break a bone in the hand?
So for a distributed load across the hand, there are distributed load tests that show you need over 300 Gs on the arm to do that. So it would depend on the mass of the hand.
What is the range of force that you would need to break a bone in the hand? Do you know from the literature? If you don't, that's okay.
I could probably figure it out.
How long would it take you to figure it out? Do you know from the literature what that number is?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Is 300 to 400 pounds of force sound right from the literature that it would take to break a bone in the hand?
For a distributed load,
Yes.
such as the taillight, no.
No, not a distributed load. A load from a motor vehicle going backwards.
Right, that's a distributed load.
Right. So you're saying 300 to 400 pounds of force would not be enough to break any bone in the hand. Is that your answer?
So for a flat distributed load, like hitting the taillight, you're gonna need higher.
How about another part of the back of the vehicle?
I guess if you hit on the very corner and it wasn't a distributed impact, like if you had a more concentrated impact,
Yes.
that could increase or decrease
Decrease.
the amount of force required.
How much would it decrease it from the number you gave?
Depends on what you're hitting, what it's made out of,
The
contact
Lexus
area.
SUV. Let's assume,
Can you,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Alessi, can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's assume we're talking about this Lexus SUV, right? But let me back up. You don't know where exactly, under your theory, that there was a contact. You don't know, you testified to on direct, you don't know exactly where that point of contact is, do you?
Correct,
You don't know.
except it's on the taillight.
Well, you're saying it's on the taillight, but you didn't observe any impact yourself personally, right?
Did I see Miss Reed's Lexus?
You didn't see the impact, correct?
That is correct.
So, and there is no firsthand witness that saw, under your view, that a collision occurred. There's no witness to say where the arm was, correct?
There's no person that saw it.
Right. And you have chosen a point of contact, okay? You chose that for your analysis, correct?
Correct?
And you picked that location, but it's also possible that under your theory that a collision occurred, that that arm could have been impacted any part of the back of the vehicle. That's possible, isn't it?
That's not probable, no.
I'm asking, is it possible?
Anything is possible. I don't deal in possibilities, I deal in probabilities. It's not probable.
So, but you don't know exactly where the point of impact was, correct?
So within the range of the light and the exact angle of the hand, no, I don't. What I do know is at the rear tail light area.
So your assumption is that that because there's a tail light that is altered, it must have been by Mr. O'Keefe's arm. That's your conclusion, correct?
My conclusion is there are tail light fragments, a broken glass, lacerations to his arm, and his DNA on the back of the vehicle in the area of the tail light.
Sir, and Your Honor, I'm going to move to strike the DNA part of that answer for obvious reasons.
I'm not going to strike it.
Okay, so you're making assumptions. You're taking what you view to be certain data, and you're coming to a conclusion, but that is based upon circumstantial information, correct? Is that fair?
Are you calling like pieces of the tail light at the scene around his body circumstantial information?
Sir, let me go to the force and go back to the force analysis. Let's go back to the numbers. I want to stay on, if we can, just the calculation. So let's go back to the minimum amount of force you understand from the literature that it takes to break any bone in the arm from the finger up. Let's start with a hand. What's the minimum amount of force that can be applied to break a bone in the hand?
So it depends on the loading. So I don't actually know. In terms of the forearm, I can tell you there's data that shows up to 300 Gs of loading, you will not get fractures. There's one up to 750 Gs showing no fractures for a male of similar height and weight of Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's take those numbers,
Okay.
okay? You said 300 and 750. Did I hear it correctly?
You did?
Okay, that's the numbers you gave that would break a bone, correct?
So the 300 actually didn't break any bones, I believe. The 750, the one example, didn't break a bone, but as you got above 350, you started to break bones.
So as
300.
you got above 350,
300.
above 300, yeah, because that's what I thought you said the first time. You got above 300, you start to get breaking bones, correct?
Correct.
And so if you take that 300 number and compare it to the 2,188 pounds of force, you have 7 times the amount of force necessary to break the bone, correct, in the force analysis?
No. If you take 300 Gs times a 12-pound arm, you get 3,600 pounds. The calculation you asked me to run earlier gave you 2,188 pounds.
Right.
So you are 1,412 pounds above the force required. Like the tolerance is 1,412 pounds above the force you would say get in a 20-mile-an-hour impact in terms of the fracture forces.
Let's do it this way.
I'm sorry?
Let's do it this way.
Okay.
The force that you calculated from my hypothetical of this Lexus SUV going backwards, you came up with the F number of 2,188, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't, what was the, you said? No, you said
2,180.
dyslexic? Or did you say Lexus? I didn't understand what you said.
The Lexus
My apologies.
SUV that you've been talking about.
Gotcha.
Okay?
I didn't hear
You
it.
came up with a number for F for force of 2,188. Are you changing that number?
Nope,
Okay,
absolutely
so
not.
let's go with your number of force from this vehicle of 2,188. I'm just simply asking, how much force does it take to break a bone in the right arm of a human being? How much force, not acceleration, how much force does it take to break a bone in the right arm?
Sure. So somewhere between 2,500, the one cadaver tested the distributed load of someone of similar size and weight, and actually close in age to Mr. O'Keefe, showed about 7,000 pounds of force to break it.
Let's go to the hand. Do you disagree that the literature shows it only takes 300 to 400 pounds of force to break a bone in the hand? Do you disagree with that?
Your question's too general. I can't answer your question. It depends on the loading. If I take my pencil, which has a very fine point, and jam it through my hand, I can jam it right through my hand because it's a very small point. But if I distribute the load and a broader load, such as hitting a taillight, it takes much more force because the load's distributed across it. It's like if I sit on the corner of my bed. I might sink in this far when I sit on the corner of my bed, but what happens when I spread my load out, when I lay on my bed like this? I don't sink in as far. Has my weight changed? And weight is basically force. No, but I've distributed it over a larger area, so for a given force, you get less sinking into the mattress. So if you hit a broad surface like a taillight or a wall like this, it takes much more force than if I were to take a singular small round object and jam it into the hand. That hurts. This does not.
Okay, if you can hear my question, if it's unclear, you tell me. For not a pen, not your bed, but for a Lexus SUV of 6,000 pounds, is there any part of the back of the Lexus in any manner where you can get a break to the hand from 300 to 400 pounds of force?
Any part on the back of the Lexus?
Yes.
Probably.
Okay. So probably, your words, you can get a break to the hand from just between 300 to 400 pounds of force. That's what you just said, correct?
So you're taking the totality of the back of it, like if you got it stuck in the bumper, potentially, yeah. But from a taillight or a broad flat surface, no.
I'm not asking about a taillight. Any part of the back of an SUV, you agree that it is probable that you can get a break of the hand bones from just 300 to 400 pounds of force?
Your question is incomplete, right? You said any part of the back, but then you wanted me to not include taillights or not include the rear body panel. If you hit a very narrow part of the car, like say the edge of the tailpipe, that creates much more of a narrow contact. So force divided by area is pressure. So if you have a very tiny area, you have very high contact pressures. And so, but if you distribute the load over a larger area, the number on the bottom of that fraction is much bigger, so your contact pressure drops. So hitting the edge of the exhaust pipe is going to have a much higher likelihood of causing a fracture than hitting flat against the tail light.
Okay, what we're going to do to make this more efficient, excuse me, sorry. Mr. Wolf, can you pull up a slide from Mr. Wolf's, or Dr. Welcher's presentation for the back of the Lexus, please? The back hatch, and Your Honor, may we publish that?
Sure. Do you know what number, though, Mr. Alessi?
Mr. Wolf does, and
And
I
then
know
he'll
you
tell
need it, so
us.
he'll tell me before I publish, and then we'll give you the number.
Your Honor, may I look here?
Yes, I'm going to let Dr. Welcher look at his slide
Oh, sure.
here
Yeah.
instead of just up there.
The back hatch, yes. Do you have one of just the rear gate? The one measuring the height, maybe? There we go. Thank you. Okay, this is your slide presentation. Is there any part of the back of the Lexus SUV that has that more concentrated area where if the hand hit it, 300 to 400 pounds of force could break it? Is there any part, for example, the edge of the license plates, above the license plates, the L symbol that sticks out that would be concentrated. Anything you see there could 300 to 400 pounds of force contacting at any of those points cause a fracture of any of the bones of the hand.
So, I don't know how to show this because in the middle photograph, right where the 2 is on the license plate,
Yes.
there's a vertical edge. That area is recessed in. So if you hit right on that vertical edge, that could potentially do it.
That could do it. How about the L of for the Lexus symbol if the hand is there?
No, it's not deep enough. The compliance of the hand is just going to sink into the car.
Is there any other part other than the license plate that the force applied, you would only need 300 to 400 pounds of force to break the hand?
Maybe the exhaust pipe, and potentially if you hand your hand up near the spoiler.
Right, so now let's go from 300 to 400. Let's go to the 2188, which is your number. Use 2188. Is there any place where in 2188 force you could have a fracture of the hand on that back gate?
Just to be clear, 2188 is the number I calculated for you. It's not, quote, my number.
I understand, but we did.
So-
I understand, but we did the calculation. Is there anywhere on the back of the vehicle where 2188 could cause a fracture of the hand?
So that was a forearm fracture tolerance I thought we were talking about, because we used the weight of the whole arm for that.
We did. And my question is there anywhere in the back of the vehicle, in your opinion, that could cause a fracture with that
I'm sorry, to the hand?
to,
Just the hand or the whole arm?
I'll take any part of the right arm. You call it the hand, the forearm. Is there any part that could cause a fracture?
So probably similarly, if you got your forearm down near that transition, like, I don't know if you can see the little dot. I'm talking about this area.
Yes. Yes.
Right here.
Yep.
So that transition between the 2 body panels.
Yes.
That could potentially do it. That's back where the reverse lights are. I'd have to look at whether, that would take it before breaking the plastic. And then, again, maybe if you hit the exhaust pipe as well. It's a much more narrow loading condition.
How about the corner of the tail lamp?
The corner of the tail lamp. I suppose if you had just your hand on the very, very corner, potentially.
Potentially. But you didn't do any of that force analysis for this case, did you?
For the hand, no.
But you did it for the head, correct?
Correct. Because that I'm able to quantify.
Mr. Alessi, that was slide 108. I just want to
I'm
keep.
sorry,
track.
Your Honor. Yes, Mr. Wolk. Yes,
All right, thank you.
thank you. You are aware, Dr. Welcher, that Mr. O'Keefe suffered no fractures of any kind in his hand, correct?
So there were no fractures noted in the autopsy report, but they didn't actually x-ray, from the records I've seen, either his hand or his arm. So there was, at least according to the autopsy report, no overt fractures, but the x-rays I saw, none of them were of the arm, and the autopsy report said no sternum, spine, I think it said torso. They didn't say that there were no fractures there.
Was there any evidence in the medical records that you reviewed of any indication whatsoever of a fracture in Mr. O'Keefe's hand?
No.
Was there any indication whatsoever in any of the medical records you reviewed that there was a fracture of any bone in the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe?
Not that I saw. Again, it wasn't x-rayed.
Was there any indication in the medical records and the autopsy that you say you reviewed of any fracture of any bone anywhere in the body of Mr. O'Keefe,
Yes.
other than the occipital bone or the skull?
There's a couple bones in the skull that were fractured, but other than the skull, no.
Correct. So, are you aware that the medical examiner for the state of Massachusetts, Dr. Scorty Bello, performed an autopsy on Mr. O'Keefe? Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And you're aware of it because you read the autopsy report, correct?
Correct.
Are you implying, and it's a question, that Dr. Scorty Bello missed a fracture or didn't look properly for a fracture on Mr. O'Keefe?
No. I'm simply indicating that, for example, a hairline fracture, I didn't see any evidence that they actually x-rayed the structure, so there would be no overt evidence of that.
There were wounds on the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
And you are saying that the medical examiner should have x-rayed that to determine whether there was a hairline fracture? Is that your testimony?
No, you're asking me about evidence and proof of absence of fracture. So I would look for an x-ray to see if that was the case. I haven't seen any evidence of an x-ray of the arms.
So it's your position that on every autopsy, there should be an x-ray of every bone in the body, and that the clinical judgment of the medical examiner should not be accepted, and there should be an x-ray of every bone before a conclusion can be drawn that there's no fracture to a bone in the body of a deceased. Is that your testimony?
Absolutely not. Like, I'm an engineer, you're asking me about proof. And so proof is somebody looked at it, somebody took an x-ray, somebody palpated it and found a comminuted fracture. So we're talking about proof.
Sir, I didn't use proof in my question.
You asked me about the opinion of a medical examiner. I'm not a
Hold
medical.
on. Only one person at a time. Mr. Alessi, let him finish, and then you can ask the question.
Your Honor, I hadn't finished my question.
Okay, then finish your question, Dr. Welcher. Wait for the question. Then let Dr. Welcher respond. It's a nightmare for Madam
I
Court
understand,
reporter
and
to
I
do
think
this.
I've been doing that, but I'll redouble my efforts. Dr. Welcher, I didn't use proof in my question. I'm going to repeat the question. Is there any indication in any medical record, autopsy report of the deceased of any fracture of any bone in the body?
That was not your original question, but to answer your question, no. Except for the skull.
Except for the skull.
Correct.
Do you understand whether the absence of any fractures other than the skull of Mr. O'Keefe was of significance to the medical examiner, Dr. Scorty Bello, in the conclusion she reached in the autopsy report that you read?
System.
Did you read the conclusions of Dr. Scorty Bello in the autopsy?
I believe so.
Are you aware of whether Dr. Scorty Bello has analyzed whether the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe are inconsistent or consistent with a motor vehicle impact? Are you aware of any analysis to that effect?
So I'm going to see you on this one.